Hello and welcome to Laytechs Weekly, episode 2nd June 2021. Laytechs Weekly is brought to you by Laytechs, your protection from tech ignorance. My name is Sean. I am having a little bit of a flu, so if you catch me sniffling, I am sorry. I apologize in advance. This week's news: iPadOS limits apps to 5GB of RAM for now. Apple's most raved lineup of the most powerful iPads come with 16GB of RAM and the iconic M1 chip. Again, it performs like what Dieter Bohn from The Verge calls it, a bullet train, right? The fastest iPad is still an iPad. The thing about bullet trains is that they're always on rails, and this limitation is the iPadOS, and no matter how powerful it is, it's useless because it will always be an iPad. In this case, the iPadOS has limited each app to only a maximum of 5GB of RAM on the usage. So even the most memory hungry apps like Procreate and LumaFusion can only use up to 5GB of RAM. Any more and the app will kill itself. This was explained by the makers of Adobe Procreate in a recent tweet, saying that this is the maximum they can do because iPadOS will not allow them to utilize anymore. So what's the fuss about this 16GB of RAM then, and the fact that do you even need a 16GB model if the maximum you can use is 5? So two reasons, right? There's two reasons why you still need a 16GB one. That's what I'm saying. So it means that iPadOS can, for the first time, keep multiple apps running in the background. So if you have 16GB, right, you can allocate a few. You can use one that maximizes on 5, right? Then you can have another two that runs behind, and you still be able to multitask. So iPad has never been able to properly multitask because you cannot run apps behind, because once the apps is behind, it pauses and then it shuts off. It is this incessant Apple way of trying to maximize battery life and try to maximize the speed and the flow and the good experience of what you're having on the iPad, to a point when you can only do one thing at one time. But with the 16GB, you can run two behind while you run one when you're actively using one, up to two. So not necessarily two. So this counts as a major improvement if Apple seriously wants us to consider this as a computer and possibly replace the macOS. The second one, the most important part of this report is that this report is being made just a week before WWDC in 2021. It's happening actually this weekend, in which Apple may announce updates on the iPadOS, and in that announcement, they might just bump up the RAM capacity on apps, which will inevitably create a divide between entry model iPads versus the Pro lineups. So the reason why it is maxed out at 5GB now is that most iPads at the moment that was sold in the past 2 years or so still can use most of the apps. So Apple wants to make sure that the experience is almost identical. But in creating the Pro line, right, Apple is saying now that there is a more powerful version and it's not the same as the others. So this will create a divide where you have the entry-level model iPads, or perhaps the iPad Air that maybe can do a little bit more than the entry-level model ones, and then the Pro lineup, which can handle all the creator stuff. Soon, if this happens, some iPads will not be pro enough to run creative apps as others, and yeah, the whole elitism that Apple wants to create will have been created. Disney Plus Hotstar comes to Malaysia. It's finally here, and it's cheaper than Netflix, believe it or not. At 55 ringgit for 3 months, which comes around to 18 ringgit per month, as compared to Netflix's identical version, which similar level, which is at about 40 over ringgit, if I remember correctly. There are, however, another two pricings. One is 12 ringgit per month, which you pay on a monthly basis. Another one is very interesting, 63 ringgit per year. The latter comes to around $5 a month, which I'm very interested to get, but nobody seems to be able to make that purchase yet, because on the Hotstar Malaysia website itself, you can only choose 3 months. So you can take 3 months first, and then once this 2 other pricing comes out, then you can upgrade to the next one. Maybe it'll be available soon. Yeah. You will have access to all the basic level Disney Plus shows in 1080 pixel, and 2 concurrent screens at a time, kind of like the basic Netflix, the 43 ringgit model base Netflix, not the smartphone one. The smartphone one is just for people who don't use it, don't watch on big screens, right? This big screens. There are no updates on 4K resolution compatibility yet. That will roll out soon. Disney is also bringing more local movies and television shows into the collection as part of its localization efforts. Disney's IPs aren't exactly known for being global and all-inclusive, and they know that this needs to change if they want to beat Netflix. So, Disney's price is super cheap compared to Netflix, right? It's like half the price, or maybe even less than half the price. Is this just a temporary, predatory pricing strategy to weed out smaller competitors, or will this spark a cascade in the price of video streaming services? Because Netflix knows that they cannot compete with Disney Plus if we have to choose either or. Most people would choose either or because $50 a month is not cheap, right? And if you're going at between 15 to 20 ringgit a month and you have to choose either or, people will go to Disney Plus because there are a lot more AAA titles on Disney Plus than there are on Netflix. Although Netflix has been very viral in a sense that a lot of these movies are, these unknown movies that are funded by Netflix have become memes online. So people who want to be part of the meme will want to keep a Netflix subscription. That is kind of a thing where only those who can afford will consider, but those who cannot will choose either or, and they would most probably choose Disney Plus versus Netflix. So if this continues on in the long term, Netflix will be forced to push their price down and probably look around on the pricing again, on the offerings again. That said, what we are having on Disney Plus is not the same as the ones that Disney is also bringing out all the new movies and everything. This is just the very basic stuff. If what we hear with the US side is connected to what we will get here, is that Disney will be releasing some of their cinema level movies, the new cinema level movies, into Disney Plus at a higher price, which you pay a few more. Like it was supposed to be around between 15 to 25 US dollars just to go in and watch that thing. It probably be cheaper here, or it probably won't even be available here because movie tickets here are a lot cheaper than in the US, and they probably can't justify that. In any case, we will see as time progresses what kind of pricing strategy they come up with. 7-Eleven plans 500 EV charging stations in the US by 2022. This is interesting. As the world moves away from petrol stations, convenience stores that are built next to these gas stations or petrol stations will find their business models coming to an end. 7-Eleven plans to jump ahead by selling car juice with these 500 stations in the US. So they are building the charging stations to sell electricity to EV cars. It's a good move since many 7-Eleven petrol stations today are situated strategically along highways anyway. All they need to do is just to flip their infrastructure and then, they're ready for the future. So this article by itself did not strike me as newsworthy, but rather when compared to the likes of 7-Eleven here in Malaysia. What is the management team doing to such an iconic name to drive it down to the levels below KK Mart and Speed Mart? For those who don't know, KK Mart and Speed Mart are actually local, kind of like little supermarkets that are a lot cheaper, and they strategize themselves by purposely opening right next to 7-Eleven and taking the business all away from them. And at the same time, 7-Eleven itself is not moving forward and not improving itself to a point where when you walk in, you're paying a premium that just can't be justified because everything is just really, really bad. I'm talking about chillers that just won't chill. It's you go in, you want to get a drink, and it's just not cold. And it's not in one or two 7-Elevens. It's almost all the 7-Elevens you're getting it, and the ACs are not working. So it really is quite bad. So now that the Malaysian government is also giving up incentives for EV cars. Perhaps convenience stores can emulate what 7-Eleven is already doing in the US and build more DC fast charging stations. Or you can charge our cars a little slower with the cheaper ones, because I would believe that fast charging technology only comes to the most expensive cars, and for every one of us, we're getting the cheap ones, which are slower chargers, which is good because we will stay in your cafes a little longer and spend a little more on coffee and cakes that we don't need. Chromebooks enable their version of AirDrop. AirDrop is the most amazing feature in tech, provided you have an iPhone, iPad, and MacBook. And let's not forget, Apple had to destroy cable transfer in order to push this agenda for us to believe that AirDrop is good versus cable, because they make cable worse. Regardless, right? I hate that I love it so much. Anyway, Google has just released a similar function that allows users to move files to and from Chrome OS. It's called Nearby Share, and I do admit that it's not a very apt name compared to AirDrop. This is done with either Bluetooth LE, WebRTC, or peer-to-peer Wi-Fi, so you can actually do it even without an internet connection. While MacBooks are the go-to laptops for fancy rich kids in schools, Chromebooks are the ones used by the other 95% of the lot, especially in the US. In Malaysia, we still have a lot of people who are using the Windows counterparts, but Chromebooks are the ones that Americans use. And being Chromebooks with minimal ports, this feature is actually very helpful to them. iPhone may finally get a 120Hz refresh rate display. This was the rumor circulating for the iPhone 12, but it clearly didn't happen. It is now reportedly in production, based on a report from South Korean news outlet The Elect, claiming that Samsung and LG have started producing said displays. While we are all looking forward to an iPhone that sports proper present-time display refresh rate, don't forget that another rumor on this year's iPhone also include or exclude the Lightning charging port. Eeks. I don't want to see that go away. I don't want to have to spend another like 200 ringgit or 300 ringgit for the MagSafe thing when I can just use all these old Lightning chargers that I have, Lightning cables that I have, right? Right, that's all for this week's Laytechs Weekly. Laytechs Weekly is available on Anchor FM, Google Overcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and more. Our full videos are available on YouTube, and I post bits and clips on Instagram and Facebook. If you like Laytechs Weekly, it would really help if you could rate and review it on the podcast feeder or YouTube, so more can discover it and see more value of it, and it will make me happy and want to make more podcasts for you guys. Alright, that's all for this week's Laytechs Weekly, 2nd June 2021. My name is Sean. Stay safe. See you next week. Au revoir.